Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. I have with me my friends from EXL, Dave Miller and Laurel Jordan. So before they do the introduction, as carriers launch new products, divest all blocks of business or need talent, TPA, third-party administration, is an avenue that many have utilized as they bring expertise, technology, and people. And claims don't stop, whether they're being administered internally or being outsourced. So Dave and Laurel, before we get into our fireside chat, would love to hear a little bit more about your background and the area that you play in the TPA space.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Dave Miller, and I'm in charge of business development for EXL as regards the life and annuity space. And before we start off, Bobby said that for everybody who is attending this session, there'll be a $5 chip at the end of it. If you make it that far, pick it up at the table back there, and we thank you for showing up. Now, sorry about that. Anyway, we appreciate you guys hanging in there. In my role, I'm in a unique position because as carriers look to us to take the administrative burden off of their hands, one of the first obvious issues on their plate is claims, right? And that wasn't always like that. Until the pandemic came around, claims was always like, hey, it was a table stake, but it wasn't a primary focus. But the pandemic changed all that with the increase in claims activity. Now it's a table stake. Along with everything else we provide, what kind of innovation, what kind of automation can you provide as far as claims goes? So we're looking forward to talking a little bit more about that today.
Laurel?
Hi, everybody. I'm Laurel Jordan. I am an AVP of Delivery at EXL and the head of our Claims Center of Excellence. In my career, I've only been with EXL about 1.5 years, but prior to that, I worked for another TPA for 2.5 decades, and primarily in the claims space before I went into transformation, transitions, and now leading operations. So I would say claims, one of my favorite taglines is it's fulfilling that promise of the policy, and it's always been an afterthought. Everybody, new business is the moneymaker, and it brings it in the door. Claims is where we're settling up that policy, and it takes, as Brent alluded to earlier, a special set of people that have the understanding, the knowledge, and the background to process claims, and a different level of empathy, in my opinion. I started in the claims space and grew up in that claims space. So as an outsourcing company where we take it on, claims is a high center of focus for us because we know that servicing on the front end from the new business to the policyholder services is all very important, but how you deliver at the end of that policy is what makes the service the most important piece of it.
Well, thanks, Dave and Laurel. So Dave, I'll start off with, from a market indicators perspective, why are carriers moving in the TPA direction?
Well, costs are an obvious factor, right? When somebody can come in and reduce their cost of doing business by 30 to 40% by doing business with a company like ours that has a significant global delivery model, that means a lot, right? At the same time, as we mentioned, claims is taken front and center here, right? So it's not only about just saving them money and achieving those cost reductions, it's about bringing innovation to the table. And at the same time, if you think about policy administration in general, whether it's a homegrown platform, whether it's a vendor-supplied platform, claims was kind of an afterthought, right? It wasn't a standard component for the most part. Some vendors may have some loosely coupled claims modules, but for the most part, it was an add-on, right? It was an add-on to administration, to billing, and so forth. So even in our case, where we have our own IP and a very reputable industry-leading policy administration platform, there's a reason we're partnering with the folks at Benekiva, right? Because it gives us an advantage in the marketplace. It resonates, and it makes our value proposition a lot stronger.
And Laurel, what are carriers experiencing on the claims side when they are in that TPA scenario?
So I think the biggest thing as we go out and start working with carriers is they all have so many manual processes working off of spreadsheets, and blocks of these shoebox policies that aren't on any administration system, and they have this manual SOP or procedure to do this, and this one, and that one. And so when we bring them in, that's the first question we always ask. What are your manual processes? How can we add efficiencies for you? What can we do to make the process better so your claims processors can not only, one, build up their skill set, but two, increase their efficiencies?
No, great. And Dave, you know, as carriers are evaluating third-party administration as an option, what are three insights you can give them?
So costs, obviously, you've got to prove the cost model first, right? And that operating model, as you work through it and create it together, is going to prove results over time, okay? At the second up is the innovation, the efficiencies and the effectiveness benefits that you're going to bring to the table. It's not just a matter of achieving SLAs, but what we're talking about here leads to retention, can lead to increased market share, things that actually drive their business, right? And I guess the third one is probably the experience, right? I don't want to minimize the experience, but there has to be a better way of impacting the client where they're much more engaged, much more involved. They're not having to deal with paper. The carrier's not having to support all these manually intensive tasks. The end client is much more involved in the process, right? And they're empowered. And that's what they deserve, right? After paying their premiums for however many years. And in some instances, right, depending on the product that's being sold, I guess Steve probably mentioned it earlier, when you're talking about final expense, when you're talking about pre-need business, those claims have to be paid within 24 hours, right? If you're not able to support that kind of process, if you have your experienced talent leaving, right, and you can't backfill for it, and you know you're not able to pay claims in a timely manner when that death occurs, it won't take long for it to resonate in the market, and you'll be receiving DOI complaints and everything else under the sun, and your agents will stop selling for you. So it really has become a significant differentiator for those of us that can support that service in those SLAs, as well as the carriers that are looking to launch new products in those areas, right? Those markets. Pre-need and final expenses become a hot button issue, and carriers that were never involved in that market before have recognized the opportunity, and so we're able to essentially set up a platform. We've got the claims right off the bat if they occur, and stand something like that up in 3 to 4 months, right, where it used to take 18 to 24 if they were using their traditional internal services. So it's a really cool time to be in this business, no doubt.
And Laurel, you know, it's great to get, you know, Dave's insights on the market side of the house, and I feel like it's equally, we need to hear the voice of operations. So what are 3 insights you would share from an operations perspective that to a carrier?
So my first insight is the efficiencies it adds to your customer service and that customer experience. When you first come in with the first notice of loss, that process should be simple, it should be easy, because people are dealing with a loss, whether it's a death or a medical loss of some sort of claim. If they're having a critical illness like Brent's story earlier, they don't need the red tape and the hassle of going through so much of a process. My second thing is automation, digitalization, AI, making that process easier. You know, there's a joke when we say, when we're going around to these other carriers, there's a certain subset of policyholders that are older that don't want anything electronic. But there's also that subset of those older people who say, no, send me an email. I don't want to walk to the mailbox every day. So ease of that with the digital, being able to e-sign, validate the death electronically, do your death match, everything, those things, the automation, the efficiencies, the return of investment in that alone not only reduces the AHT you have to apply to that, it also makes your employees happier because they're not going to 20 different systems to look here, there, and everywhere to validate that claim and get it processed. The other thing is the auto adjudication. You know, we're going to a much more Amazon-like atmosphere where you should be able to pay your claim and automate it, and if it meets the certain criteria based off of the carrier's rules and guidelines, where they can validate that death electronically, they can do a child support lookup or anything that they need to automate it and get that claim processed without that human element, so the human element can focus on the more complex and more difficult claims, the ones that need more involvement. If it's a simple $5,000 pre-need or final expense policy and there's not a whole lot of requirements that are needed, it's a natural beneficiary, it shouldn't have to have a human person going in and doing all these 20 different steps to process that claim. We should be able to automate that and have it go straight through.
Great. Dave and Laurel, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. You know, TPA is a growing market, and I am very happy that you were able to share some of these insights to our audience. Thank you.
Our pleasure. And don't forget to pick up your chips at the back of the rear table on your way out.